I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On tonight's episode, we'll discuss a couple of commitments in the works here at Najee Harris from IMG, committed to the Gators this weekend. And just a few short hours, you heard from Creed Whittemore, the wide receiver, the brother of Trent Woodmoore from Gainesville, Buchholz, committing to the Gators. Emry Jones ends up at Arizona State, and Arch Manning wants to visit campus this summer. We'll discuss what that means, and we'll look ahead toward what the Gators have coming up over the summer in terms of recruiting. So if you are a fan of recruiting, tonight is a good episode for you. But first, we'll start off. We just got off the phone with a patron named Quillen Walshingham. Thank you so much, Quillen, for hopping on a call with us. There's a certain level you get on Patreon where if you want to hop on a call with us, that you have the right to do so. And Quillen, we talked to him tonight, had a great call, and it was really cool getting hear his background and love for the Gators and everything else. Will.
Hey, man, that's what this is about. I mean, Florida football, more than anything, is about relationships. And, it's about going with your kids. It's about building that into your kids. It's about looking back at, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s for people who followed the program that long, and hopefully that's what we'll be doing 30 years from now, is talking to our kids about, our love for the Gators and their love for the Gators and all that sort of stuff. So it was cool to hear that from somebody who's followed us for as long as he has. And, we appreciate, obviously, that somebody's following us and supporting us as well. And, one of the things we really want to do, we announced last week, we got a preseason magazine coming out, the support's been overwhelming. We've had people go over. If you go to readandreaction.com/mag, you can sign up. There's a 20% off coupon that we're going to send to you when the thing's out in a couple of weeks here. We're getting excited because we're starting to finish that thing up and start to look and see it actually come together, which is cool. But one of the things we want to do for our Patreons is go ahead and give that to them for free. So if you're a Patreon subscriber, we appreciate it. And, we'll be sending a copy your way so you get it before anybody else does. And also, just as a thank you for supporting us over there, we're going to be giving it to you for free. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears going into that, but we appreciate everybody who supported us. And again, if you're interested in just getting the copy, you can go over to readandreaction.com/mag, sign up. We'll send you a coupon once it comes out for 20% off of it. And, it's going to be like 100 pages, more than 100 pages at this point, based on the way you and I write. There's a little bit of stuff in there where we talk a little bit about, SEC runner-up Georgia. But other than that, it's all Florida all the time for the magazine. It's excited. I'm excited to see the response and see whether people like this as much as we do.
It's our magazine. We get to acknowledge what we want to acknowledge. That's the thing. So we're gonna have some fun in that magazine too. And we might slant history the way we want to. I don't have a problem with
it. We're not slanting history. The Georgia Bulldogs
were being accurate.
SEC runner-up last year.
They were. That's totally accurate. No problem with that. All right, let's start with two bits. Najee Harris from IMG Academy commits to the Gators over the weekend. Will, another one from IMG. We saw some of those IMG, IMGainesville, IM Gators tweets going around. There's tweets about going for the whole team. Najee Harris comes in with a big commitment here from 4-star. Much needed offensive lineman commitment as well. Andrew Ivins from 24/7 Sports describes him as a big, burly interior offensive line prospect whose strengths seem to fit power-based rushing attack. Has already logged plenty of miles on the odometer, having started as a freshman at St. Lucie West Centennial before occupying the starting left guard spot at IMG Academy for both his sophomore and junior seasons. Well, this is a crucial commitment along the offensive line, but you get the double dose with it being IMG. More positive momentum from Billy Napier. We know we haven't seen one of those top dogs in this class commit yet, but man, this is a good sign.
Yeah, well, Harris was one of the guys who tweeted out the IMGainesville tweets and that sort of stuff after the commitment. So, yeah, I mean, it's great that Napier's been able to go there, get two guys from IMG Academy. Obviously, Kamari Wilson, a big-time recruit from there. And then you got Harris here, who's a 4-star interior offensive lineman. And it's interesting when you start looking at what Napier has done. Obviously, you get Jordan Herman, the community college guy who committed a couple of weeks ago, offensive tackle, 6'8", 370. You bring in Osiris Torrance, interior offensive lineman from Louisiana. Cameron Waits, also a huge dude, 6'8", 372 at tackle. a transfer from Louisiana. He's starting to remake that offensive line room with some of those guys he's brought in, and he needs to, right? Because you start looking at the guards on Florida's roster. Riley Simons, Will Harrod, Ethan White, Osiris Torrance, and Kingsley Echokin were all signed in the 2019 class, right? And Napier added 2 guards in the 2022 class, but Hevesy only brought in 3 between the 2020 and 2021 classes, which really means that's an undermanned space for Florida. It's an under-talented space for Florida as well. So you get both of those with Harris, right? You got a guy who's a 4-star. Now he's 301st overall nationally. Maybe he rises a little bit, but 301st overall nationally is a very, very good player. This is not a can't miss star, but it's hard to rank offensive linemen. You don't really know how they're going to develop. And you figure that guys like Napier with his track record and Rob Sale with his track record and Darnell Stapleton, that they're going to be able to get the most out of the offensive lineman that they bring in. So I'm excited about them bringing in a guy at guard. I think it's good to bring in, interior offensive linemen who are specifically interior offensive linemen rather than just recruiting tackles and then moving them inside, which is what's really kind of happened the last few years. I mean, you think about Ethan White started out, I think, as a tackle recruit. Josh Braun was definitely a tackle recruit. Brett Heggie was a tackle recruit, and those guys all wound up on the interior offensive lineman. In this case, you got a guy who's been playing interior offensive lineman for a while, going to be an interior offensive lineman at Florida. You don't have to teach him a new position. That's what he's done. And so hopefully he can translate the talent he's shown on the field already into immediate production at Florida coming up the next year or two.
He's 6'3", 327, and you beat him out for Alabama, Miami, Michigan State, Oklahoma, and Texas A&M. All the top dogs going after this guy. So, I mean, this is good. He's an in-state kid. I know he's from Port St. Lucie originally, so that's kind of Miami territory down there. So you're getting a kid with a little bit of South Florida ties. And, Bama and A&M seem to get almost whoever they want. Michigan State's been on a roll on the recruiting trail too, and certainly Oklahoma's been a tough competitor. Those are not names of schools we've seen Florida beat out a whole lot over the last few years, Will. Looking at that and looking at the fact that it's IMG, we're not getting too excited about this, right? With the IMG thing, this is a pretty massive get early on from IMG, because you just saw another IMG. I believe it was defensive lineman. Was it Norman today? Get Cristobal.
Norman. Yep.
Yeah, get Cristobal to Florida. So it seems like whatever's going on down there with IMG, something's starting to shift, and this is just an early indicator that it wasn't a one-time fluke.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, you can't get the first recruit from. You can't get the second recruit from IMG until you get the first. You can't get the third until you get the second. And so this is all part of that, right? And if Napier's going to build a pipeline from a high school in Florida, you can do a lot worse than IMG Academy, right? Like a lot of stars have gone to Ohio State and Alabama from that particular school. And so it makes sense that Napier's there. And one of the things he did very, very early on in his tenure was get his butt down there to IMG and make sure that he knew that staff and make sure that he sort of ingratiated himself there. Obviously, getting Wilson to come from IMG right away, a big, big, big deal. But now you've got, and one of the things we said at the time is Wilson probably won't have a huge role in recruiting people to Florida in the 2022 class. Right. Where he'll have a role is being able to get all those guys he knows from IMG to at least give Florida another look. And, they'll be able to text him and call him and figure out exactly how the school fits and is Napier everything he says he is and all that sort of stuff, right? And there's nothing better than having a guy you trust sitting there on the team telling you, from a recruiting perspective, if you're a coach, having one of your former recruits who's now a player, going back and telling the guys at the school that, yeah, this guy's everything he says he is. And, so from the standpoint of sort of the IMG tribe is becoming something that's a significant thing in Gainesville, I think that's significant. Obviously, there's still work to be done. But, look, you can't thumb your nose up at IMG recruits who are in the top 300 who decide to come your way. That's a big deal, especially, like I said, at a position of need at offensive lineman, particularly interior offensive lineman.
Fired up, good signs. Let's move on to another source of excitement over the weekend here. Creed Whittemore commits. We'll switch over to 4 bits here for Creed Whittemore. The brother of Trent Woodmoore, the wide receiver, ends up committing to the Gators. He plays quarterback at Gainesville Buchholz. This is from Andrew Ivins at 24/7 Sports. Again, he says, a quarterback on Friday nights that's often one of the best, if not the best athlete on the field. He spent the last 2 seasons directing a spread option attack to near perfection, having accounted for over 4,000 yards of total offense and nearly 50 touchdowns. Serves up an adequate deep ball and is being recruited by at least one FBS program to take snaps at the next level, but is mostly viewed as a wide receiver at the college level, given his ability to change directions and make moves in the open field. Again, coming in, Whittemore's brother, a lot of assumptions that this guy's going to play receiver at Florida. Will, what do you see him playing at the next level?
Oh, I mean, I think he's definitely going to play receiver from the standpoint of that's where his future is going to be. If you think about the NFL, the 423rd ranked national player is a really good wide receiver for a guy who hasn't played wide receiver at all, right? Because that's what he's being rated as a wide receiver. And in fact, if you look at 24/7 Sports, they have him at 223 overall. So what that says is there's a big spread in terms of what people think of him. And in many ways that might be tied to people not necessarily seeing him get a lot of snaps at receiver. So one thing that's worth watching is what happens to his rankings as he works his way through the different camps. Because as he goes through camps where he's able to show the skills that he's going to need when it comes to being a wide receiver, I think you're going to see that, right? The other thing is that Trent Woodmoore might have been the second best quarterback on the roster last year in terms of, they had a lot of trick plays for Trent Woodmoore on the particular team. And so, look, I think Napier is going to take advantage of that, right? I think, we saw it with Kadarius Toney. Every once in a while, Florida was able to break that out. There's nothing bad about having a guy who knows how to throw the ball at the wide receiver position. It makes the defense prepare for something else, and it gives your offense the ability to throw a wrinkle at the defense and at a really opportune time be able to put a explosive play on the board. So look, the Whittemore family is athletic. Trent obviously playing for Florida, Creed now committed to Florida, but if you go look, he's got cousins and all sorts of other stuff who are committed at different places as well. One of them is, I believe, a 3-star quarterback who's committed to I'm gonna get this wrong, but I think it might be like Maryland or something like that. So there are.
They have a brother at Troy.
I mean, it is an athletic family, right? Yeah. So when they talk about his ability to shift and that sort of stuff, I absolutely believe that. Look, I think the reality is Trent Woodmoore is one of the guys I'm most excited about at the wide receiver position. And so if Creed is anywhere near as good of an athlete as he is, I think Florida's going to be pretty happy. But from the sounds of it, it sounds like Creed's a better athlete than Trent Woodmoore was, especially coming out of high school. And so if you're getting a better athlete who has some of the same skills as Trent, that's great. Again, the other thing is and this is one of the things about both of these recruits. We already talked about Harris and the offensive line, but wide receiver is really undermanned. That room, you've got Justin Shorter, who's gone after the year, Trent Woodmoore, who's a redshirt junior, Xavier Henderson's a junior. Nobody else is a proven commodity, right? So even the guys who may be there next year, I mean, look, if Whittemore has a big year, he's gonna go to the pros. If Henderson has a big year, he's going to the pros. Shorter's going to be gone after this year. So the 3 guys who've actually caught a ball and are tested players may not be on the roster next year. So you need to be loading up on wide receivers at this point. They tried in the 2022 class. We're only able to bring in a couple of guys, but Arliss Boardingham's kind of a tweener. Tony Livingston's kind of a tweener between tight end and wide receiver. This is a guy who's going to play wide receiver, has some skills, and specifically some of the separation that they're talking about is stuff that will be really useful in the slot, which is definitely a place where Florida doesn't have anybody where they've recruited somebody specifically for that position.
Yeah, I'm playing quarterback at the high school level. He's going to be able to read the soft spots in the defense. That's a positive for a wide receiver. He's going to know where to be and when to be there. Also, with the older brother going to school there, he's going to have an inside look at the program. He's going to know what's going on a little earlier. He's probably going to be able to, maybe your learning curve's a little bit shorter coming into the program. Not saying you're going to jump in and make an immediate impact, but maybe by, sophomore season, he's ready to go.
Well, and again, I go back to, we talked about Kamari Wilson, and him going back and telling the guys at IMG that Napier's everything he said he was going to be. But Napier recruited Kamari Wilson, right? Napier did not recruit Trent Woodmoore. So for Creed Whittemore to commit means that Trent Woodmoore is at least satisfied enough with Billy Napier that he's not saying anything bad about it, right? I mean, he's happy with what's going on, because I don't think you'd tell your brother, hey, yeah, come over to this toxic situation I'm in, or a situation where, this just isn't a good change. I committed to Mullen, this isn't what I bought into, that sort of stuff. You can envision a scenario like that. A player like Creed would look someplace else. The fact that he's coming to Gainesville again, now we have two examples of places where a player can get information about Napier and about the staff. And, we've heard a lot from different players. There's an episode of Gators Breakdown where Dave and I interview Lorenzo Lingard that's going to be coming up either today or tomorrow. And that was one of the things he said, is that what you see is what you get with Coach Napier and with the staff, and that the staff sort of adjusts their expectations and the way they coach to the players' skills. And so you're hearing that from current players. It's apparently getting back to recruits who have connections with those current players. And so I think both of these are a sign that things are healthier than they were on the recruiting trail. Now, whether that translates into the top 5 class that we need, or the top 3 class that we need, jury's still out on that. But, these are very, very solid players. And, with 4 commits now, Florida's got an average player ranking of 88.76. That still needs to bump up, but they have not done the McElwain or the Mullen where they're sitting at 85 or 86, with 10 commits, and they got to hit on every single 5-star to make it a successful class. Right. We're not there. And these are solid contributions to that, to the 23 class.
So not quite to the level we want to be, but positive steps, and definitely good guys to fill out an elite class. That certainly won't hurt anything coming in here. So, and hey, let's just be honest. It's nice to get some commit. We just doubled the size of the class over the weekend. Will, that's great.
Well, and look, we all know that D-Day is really July 23rd, right? I mean, Malik Bryant, Peyton Kirkland, and Derek LeBlanc are all committing on July 23rd. You've got, you mentioned Norris, who's committing sometime soon. You figure the guys like AJ Harris, Kamani McLean, Tony Mitchell, Cedric Baxter, Trayon Webb, those guys are all going to commit. So the fact that they haven't committed yet means I don't have any of them in the Florida fold right now, right? We don't know. But the fact that all of those guys are going to commit, some of them are going to come to Gainesville. And the question for Napier is now one of volume, not one of quality. I think it's going to be a question of how many of these elite guys can he bring? Because look, I mean, if he brings in, if he brings in, say, he doesn't have, if he brings in the 3 guys from July 23rd, right? That's almost a top 5 class. Like just those 3, and the average player rankings up to 91.6. You add McLean and Trayon Webb, and now you're at 92.9. That's pretty much right where Georgia finished last year, right? Now, granted, you got to fill that out with the rest of the class, but that's kind of what you're looking for once you get done with the summers, just where it's that average player rating. They're going to be able to get to an average player rating, I think, that's pretty close to where Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and those teams are at. And that's what we're really looking for, right? So, look, 3 months from now, we might be sitting here going, geez, nobody's committed. All these guys who were coming to campus, they all sort of had Florida in their top 5 or their top 3 and then decided to go someplace else. And if that's the case, you and I will be the first ones, or at least I'll be the first one. You'll still be kind of a homer, but I'll be the first one to criticize Napier and the recruiting. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think based on what we're hearing, sort of just the percolations through the program and the organization, one of the criticisms of Mullen, especially behind the scenes, was that the recruiting apparatus was disorganized at times. And I think, Napier's Army is sort of brought up as like this generic thing, but the reality is what that is an organization that's being built so that nothing drops through the cracks. So if Kamani McLean goes someplace else, it's not going to be because the staff didn't call him often enough. It's not going to be because they didn't have his phone number, right? Or he didn't have his position coach's phone number, like we heard from ETN earlier this year, where he wanted to get a hold of Knox and didn't know how, right? Like that's not going to be the reason they miss on a player. They may miss out on a player because of NIL benefits someplace. They may miss out on a player because they just don't fit from a relationship perspective. They may miss out on a player because the scheme doesn't fit. But I think we can say with pretty good certainty they're not going to miss out because they overlooked something simple. And, that means that at the end of the day, I think we're going to be happy with the way this class looks, but obviously still a lot to prove.
Well, positive steps this weekend, couple of commits in the fold here. Najee Harris, Creed Whittemore. Let's keep the momentum going here. Like you said, that July 23rd day, we keep stressing that. Circle that on your calendars, everybody. That's going to be an important day. A lot of big time commitments coming down out of Orlando that day. Specifically, we're referring to five-star Malik Bryant there, leading the way from Orlando Jones. Let's move on to 6 bits. Emry Jones former Florida Gators starter in the 2021 season here, is going to spend 2022 at Arizona State. Technically has 2 years of eligibility, Will, so he could be 2 years out there with the Sun Devils, getting $75,000 and a use of vehicle in exchange for marketing opportunities through NIL with ASU. He's still got to beat out quite a quarterback room there. I believe there's 5 quarterbacks on the roster for the Sun Devils this year. Second Gator starter to end up in the Pac-12, joining linebacker Mahmoud Diabate, who will be playing at Utah. Utah come to Gainesville, of course, first game of the season. But we'll see some Jones versus Diabate. I think I saw Diabate tweet at Jones. I guess we'll see if I can catch you on some of those plays we talked about in practice now. So it'll be cool. Like one of the cool things about it, sucks to lose players to other schools at times, but this is a guy who gave 4 solid years to this program here, and I'm going to do nothing but root for him to kill it at Arizona State. Hope he does a great job, and certainly Arizona State, they definitely could use a player of his caliber. I mean, we're looking at the Pac-12. Will, I know we don't talk a lot of Pac-12 ball on this show, but where do you think he slots in the Pac-12? He's got to be in the upper third of the quarterbacks in the Pac-12 immediately.
I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, because if you just look statistically at Emry Jones last year, he was not bad. He was, quarterback rating of around 140, ran for something like 6 yards per rush, a lot of interceptions, but, not had more touchdowns than interceptions. But then you start stripping away the Samford game, and then you start stripping away the Vanderbilt game, and all of a sudden the statistics really take a nosedive. And so how much of and we all watched it, right? I mean, we all saw the games against South Carolina and Missouri and Kentucky and the frustration. And Florida had a real separation between the yards that it gained on the field on a per play basis and the actual points that got put on the board. So I don't know how to answer that question. I think one of the things you see in college football is in most conferences, you'll have like 1 or 2 either above average or elite quarterbacks. And then you sort of have a cluster in the middle. And then you have a couple of teams that have bad quarterbacks. So like last year, Ken Seals was really bad for Vanderbilt, right? Bazelak was bad for Missouri. But then you just had sort of a grouping of guys who are all sort of in the same range. And in fact, if you look at the offensive ranks there's a lot of jumbling between how good they were in the SEC. But then you get to the top 6, and the top 6 quarterbacks by quarterback rank all matched with the best offenses in the SEC. And so I don't think he's going to put Arizona State in that spectrum, right? I don't think he's going to be that much better than Jaden Daniels. I think he'll be an adequate replacement. I think maybe being freed up from some of the expectations in Gainesville allows him to pull the trigger a little bit quicker. And to be honest, if some of the hesitation goes away, I think he's going to be a much better player than he was at Florida. Certainly he's going to be playing against defenses that maybe are not as athletically gifted, which means that the running game will be more prevalent, or at least he'll be more successful in being able to do that. And it's not that he wasn't successful. It's just that he didn't have a bunch of explosive plays. But this is one of those rare transfers where it's really a win-win. I mean, you mentioned Diabate going out to Utah. That one was a little bit of a kick in the gut, because we all sort of looked at that and said, but we need linebackers, and we need linebackers with experience. Like, what are you doing? Same thing with Hopper, right? Jones, his career in Gainesville had run its course. And, I think we're thankful for the time that he put in and the effort that he put in and the way that he handled what obviously was a difficult situation with Anthony Richardson last year. But we're ready to turn the page. And I think most people are ready to turn the page for the Anthony Richardson era, which means that, hey, I'm glad he's in the Pac-12, because we're not going to have to play him. Or if we do, that means we're in a fun bowl game probably. And then beyond that, it's, where does he sit? I don't know. Middle of the pack is probably where I think.
Yeah, I certainly think he's going to be one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the Pac-12 for sure. But I'd like to see. Let's see Arizona State. I definitely, he brings more. He's more athletic than Daniels. Daniels is, he's probably got a better arm than Jones overall. And we'll see Daniels, of course, at LSU. For those of you keeping track, Jaden Daniels transferred to Brian Kelly in LSU, so we'll see if he can win that job there. But I think Jones will be good for that locker room out there. They've had a lot of instability this offseason at Arizona State, so he's walking into a difficult situation. But, Billy Napier, before he took that Louisiana job, he was set to stay on with Herm Edwards in Tempe. They were going to keep him on. Todd Graham had left the program. They were going to keep Napier on. So you got to think maybe that tie with Herm Edwards and a word from Billy Napier, that probably helped get Arizona State over the top there, Will.
I mean, probably.
Total speculation, by the way. Just guessing.
Well, except you were calling him to Arizona State on, I think it was Gators Breakdown a couple of months ago. You were sort of pointing out that might be
just
where
saw the opening. So. Yeah, little connection there with Billy and Herm. Too.
Well, and look, I think Emry Jones' issue was never physical. His physical ability, I don't think, is in doubt in terms of his arm strength and in terms of his ability to run the ball. I think the issue that we ran into last year was decision making and accuracy. Right. And I think both of those can improve. The question is how much. Right. And look, I mean, we've seen quarterbacks be in Gainesville and struggle and then go elsewhere and play good before. Right. I mean, Jeff Driscoll went to Louisiana and Louisiana Tech, and all of a sudden was good. You had Jacoby Brissett go to NC State.
Just go ahead and name all the quarterbacks from the last decade. Go ahead.
Will Greer go to West Virginia.
Yep.
The only one that I can't name is Trent Harris. So, we've seen guys struggle in games and go someplace else and get better. What you don't typically see, though, is a guy who's just a beat slow on a read really be able to close that gap. So I'm going to be curious to see what happens at Arizona State. Again, I think he's going to be good because I think he was good last year. Too many turnovers and struggled in the red zone. And when the field got shorter, that was really when he struggled. If that continues, Arizona State is going to be kind of what they were last year, right? If he fixes some of those problems, then Arizona State might be a real threat in the Pac-12. And that's the thing, is you're looking at it with 2 years of eligibility. If he comes in there and sort of puts up kind of a Joe Burrow LSU first year, you go, well, that wasn't great, but I got a whole offseason now to work with the guy to get him up to speed and get that senior, that super senior year to be a real differentiator. And so I actually think in many ways, this makes sense for Arizona State from the standpoint of they have the possibility of having him for 2 years. And so, even if you get an average performance this year, if you think you can build that into an above average performance after that, then we're good.
I'll tell you what, at Oklahoma State, at Utah, or at Oklahoma State, Utah, and at USC versus Washington in the first month of the season, or first 5 games of the season. So, or 6 games there. So that's going to be a tough opening stretch for Emry Jones. So that'll be interesting. But Emry Jones ends up at Arizona State. Moving on to a dollar here. Arch Manning set to visit Gainesville per reports this week. Hey, listen, Will. At the end of the day, as Will Miles likes to say, at the end of the day here, am I expecting Florida to land Arch Manning? I'm not expecting it, but the fact that we're entering into the running here and it's worth a visit over the summer, and that he's making positive comments about the staff. We were nowhere on this guy's radar before Billy Napier entered the equation, and we saw they took a visit out there to him. And we thought, okay, that's, doing their homework, a little bit of a long shot. But the guys would come to visit campus and, he's looking at Georgia. He's making comments at Athens, one of the best college towns he's ever seen. Texas is certainly heavily rumored for his services. I think I saw that Ole Miss is out of the running, and it's more like Alabama, Texas, LSU, Florida, and Georgia. So you got to think the top 3 there, probably Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, with Florida and LSU as the long shot on the outside. But I always think it's crazy. It boggles my mind that the entire Manning family got out of the state of Louisiana in the first place with LSU. And especially now, LSU is a lot better than it was in the 90s when Peyton was playing ball. But, you would think one of the Manning boys would end up at LSU at some point. But, LSU is kind of on the outside, kind of like Florida is, but they're still in the hunt technically. What do you think about Billy Napier convincing Manning to at least visit the campus? And what do you think it says about Napier's ability to recruit and what the staff is going to be about, going forward?
I think it says less about his ability to recruit and more about his approach, right? Is that he is deciding to put all of his chips in an elite quarterback basket. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you bring in Arch Manning next year, you're not going to bring in a quarterback for the next couple of years after that. If you don't bring in Arch Manning this upcoming cycle, then you go on to the next cycle and you try to bring in an elite quarterback for that particular cycle. Right. And so to me, that's critical because it indicates an understanding that I think, as I've been looking at like different values in NIL, it becomes very clear that quarterback is a place where you have to prioritize, and you have to prioritize elite talent. And so Manning, look, he's the number one ranked overall player. And if he says, I'd like to come visit your campus, absolutely. Yes, we'd love to have you. Now, the question is what did it take to get him to visit the campus? And that, I think, is maybe the thing that you say, okay, this staff has some real chops when it comes to convincing somebody to, I'll put you on the short list and I'll spend some time actually doing that. Now, is he going to end up in Gainesville? I still think that ship has probably sailed. Is it absolutely critical? It's interesting. You look at his high school totals, 65% completion over the 3 years, which is good, but not spectacular. 72 touchdowns and 18 interceptions over his 3-year start as a true freshman. Again, good. I think Arch Manning's probably going to be a really, really good player, but he's had every advantage when it comes to being a quarterback along the way, right? When your uncles are Eli and Peyton and you can call them and talk about diagnosing coverages and read film and all that sort of stuff, like, that's the question I have. And I haven't done enough studying of Arch Manning to know, but is he basically a finished product who's not going to be able to develop beyond what he's done so far? If that's the case, then you're going to get good, but not elite college play from him, which may mean that, his floor is extraordinarily high, but I don't know that the ceiling of the number one overall player, if that's really what you're going for. So, but look, I mean, obviously if Napier's after him, he sees something on the film, and thinks he can be an excellent player. I think certainly, we've been hearing about Manning for 2 or 3 years now. So I think there's plenty of smoke there where that fire is. But like I said, I think this says something about the approach for Napier and staff, that they recognize that it's not good enough to bring in guys who are ranked 150th, 175th, 250th a quarterback, not because those guys don't turn into elite quarterbacks, but because they only turn into NFL draft picks like 20 or 25% of the time. And you're much better off building a program if you bring in a guy who gets drafted 75% of the time. And that is the profile of the number one overall quarterback, is that guy gets drafted in the NFL 3/4 of the time, which means if you bring a guy like that in, you're going to get elite quarterback play 3 out of 4 times, which means you've got a real opportunity to build your program into something special. So again, I think, yes, it says something about their ability to get him on the campus and their ability to recruit, but I think it says more about their approach to recruiting and how they value the quarterback position in terms of the overall recruiting profile.
Now, he's got a next to impossible expectation with that last name to live up to. However, if you go and watch this film, one of the things last season when I started watching some of his high school clips, I was very surprised at how quick he is. He's a quick dude. I mean, this is Cooper's son. It's not Eli. It's not Peyton's son. So he got his moves from Grandpa. Archie Manning could run back in the day, but he got his moves from Grandpa and Cooper. It wasn't something that so this guy, he can get back in the court in the shotgun and run around a little bit. So this is a little bit different style than his uncles that we watched play in the NFL for last 2 decades here.
The only piece of film, in all honesty, I've seen is one where the defensive end was in no condition to be running after him, and
sure,
it was a rough video to watch. But again, I don't think that's indicative of the competition he played against. I don't think that's indicative of the type of player he is. And you're right. I mean, even Eli had a little bit of an ability to move around when he was younger. I think you sort of think of Eli as the New York Giant because at Ole Miss he had a couple of big wins, but it wasn't like just constantly Eli. Peyton's always been the guy who was the statue behind the line of scrimmage and curled up in a ball whenever a defensive end got anywhere near him, but was peppering, crossing routes and out routes and all sorts of stuff and just sort of moving the ball down the field that way. Arch maybe won't be that kind of guy, right? But you don't become the number one overall rated recruit just because your name's Manning. I think some of the skills he has at high school probably come from the fact that he's got that kind of exposure, but there's a projection there when people are putting him as the number one overall recruit. And so, they're projecting he's going to get better. And so that's exciting, right? I mean, look, if he commits to Florida, nobody's going to be happier about that than me, but we're still on the outside looking in. So, again, if we're going to look at this, it says something about approach, says something about his ability to sell. But, look, your ability to sell to end up in somebody's top 5 really doesn't mean very much. You got to actually finish off the job.
I heard an interesting quote from someone who deals with the rankings with 24/7 this past week on a podcast. They were saying the rankings are done based on their projection at the NFL level. So this is what we think they'll be drafted at 4 years from now. So it's not what we think they'll do in college. It's where we think, do they have the tools? And that's what's, a lot of these guys with the measurables, you can't teach 6'7" at tackle. Can't teach that. So a lot of these guys, if they have the measurables, they get, picked, like they're going to get picked higher in the NFL draft potentially. But yeah, I'll tell you what, the draft just happened. The numbers, you've talked about the numbers with the 5 stars to the draft picks, lines up year in and year out. So these guys do a great job of scouting it. So even though not everybody works out to the level that you hope all the time, I have a feeling the guy with the last name Manning might do it, might be able to do that, Will. So
maybe so.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all we got tonight, folks. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Stand Up and Holler. All recruiting tonight, Will. All recruiting. Let's hope we keep having more recruiting episodes, and there's more to talk about on the trail here over the summer. But in the meantime, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. Join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week, and check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles, and as always, go Gators.